Right, I'm just going to record this now, and then I'll post it after we've gone through, Charles. So,
Okay. So, you ready?
Yep.
All right then. So, here's British military thinking at its finest, all right? And what you've got is a map of the Somme area. Red lines are German trenches, blue lines are British. No man's land in between them. There's a valley here. At the head of the valley, there's 2 German observation balloons spying on the Brits. So because they look like giant sausages floating in the air, we call it Sausage Valley. All right, takes a lot of thinking, that one. And then because that valley is called Sausage Valley, the next one north, just across the road, we call it Mash Valley. So you've got Sausage and Mash Valley there.
right.
The picture here, these are German infantry in Russia in 1917. And if you look at their faces, if you have a chance to have a look at their faces, loads of them are kids.
Yeah, they don't look that old, do they?
Yeah. And the guy marked with the cross here, this is him a few months later. Now, they were in Russia, they've beaten the Russians, they're transferred to Belgium and France. And in March 1918, he's attacking with the rest of the German forces, the British lines. He gets shot and very badly hurt, and he's lying in pain in the mud, and then the poison gas comes down, and he's too badly injured to get his gas mask out, so it looks like he's had it. And all of a sudden, 2 British soldiers come running, they're wearing their gas masks, carrying a stretcher looking for wounded Brits, but they see a wounded enemy soldier and they stop, took his gas mask out, put it onto him, loaded him onto their stretcher and carried him off to safety and saved his life. And I met him in the late 1970s, and it was embarrassing because I had another elderly German gentleman hugging and kissing me and thanking me for saving his life. I said, it wasn't me, mate, you know, it was these guys back in the First World War. But he was so pro-British, it was unbelievable. The Americans come in officially in 1917, and we always tease them about turning up sort of late, but don't underestimate how many Americans joined up right at the beginning of the war in 1914. Some of them pretend to be Canadians and join the Allies. Some of them are actually joining the Germans because of ancestry, you know, German emigrants to America. And some of them are joining the French Foreign Legion, and also some of them form their own flying squadron. And the French word for squadron is escadrille. And so they call it the Lafayette Escadrille. And Lafayette's a character in American history who kicks the heck out of the Brits at the Battle of New Orleans. But the Americans formed this. And in 1917, when the Americans join the Allies proper, the squadron is virtually wound up and the Americans are absorbed into the American forces, except for this black pilot. And he's told, no, sorry, can't use you, you're black. You know, the mere fact you've been doing some excellent flying for the previous years and shooting down enemy planes doesn't count. I know, it's all wrong. Also, General Pershing made a speech, and he tells the French and the British that we are not having any control over the American forces whatsoever. He's seen what a mess we've made of it and how many casualties we've had, and he's got no intention that we should do the same to his men. Oh, except for the blacks, you can have them. So this particular group from Harlem, the Germans nicknamed them Hellfighters. The French called them Men of Bronze, and they do some amazing fighting and activities in the First World War. Right. But one of their officers is James Europe here. Now, they've got a military band, and James is in charge as conductor of the military band. 1917, start of jazz music.
Yeah.
This band are seriously into jazz. They are jazzing up everything. And they're using just normal instruments to play jazz music, but the whites who are seeing them are saying, you can't be using normal instruments, normal clarinets, trombones, this sort of thing. You must have done something to them to get this kind of music coming out. But it was just standard instruments. And James Europe and his band, they did a concert to a French audience, and it took the French a good 3 minutes to realise that the piece of music being played to them was the French national anthem, okay, but jazz style. Don't know how well they took it, because I know how fussy the French can be with their national anthem. And what happens is, when we get coach loads of French here, visitors, I get them onto the gallery, standing by their French flag, and I know within a few seconds they'll be away singing their national anthem. Works every time, you know. And bearing in mind, this place was built to stop the French invading Portsmouth around about 1860. I reckon somebody's probably spinning in their grave at the thoughts of the French national anthem being sung in the building. You got, as I say, we move west, so you've got your French town, your casualty clearing, mass graves being dug, train that we're just about to sort of get going around the track, building railway tracks, more scenery going in. But this place changes almost on a daily basis. There's stuff happening here all the time. You've got various tanks here, and I'll tell you what, if I clear or move some of these, you might be able to see some of the artifacts underneath. So, oops, let's get rid of that. So there's all sorts of bits and pieces here. Apologies for this track lane here, but as I say, we're busy building railway.
Turn this off.
And when we have groups who come here exploring for spirits and signs of life after death,
The other side of the veil.
thank you. We let them handle some of these artifacts and bits and pieces, and see if they get any sorts of reaction to that. You've got the wooden crosses in the First World War on the cemeteries. But after the war, very quickly, by 1921, all the wooden crosses are out and they're starting to put in headstones. But the wooden crosses, at first they're offered for sale to the families back home.
All right, okay.
But they're really expensive, and you have to pay for the cost of the transport as well. And it's a deliberate ploy by the government, because they don't want masses of rotten wood coming back into the country. So the vast majority of crosses end up staying out on the battlefields. They're put into piles, set on fire and burned, and then the ash is collected and scattered for miles around all over the battlefields. The thinking is that obviously they try to link Remembrance in with all the death and destruction that had gone on, and there's lots of things on the battlefields that you see, like, for example, you have to look at which direction the statue's pointing, the various memorials, because that's always the direction of the line of attack.
Right.
And even here, the steps where you came up, at the top, we've painted the floor green with artificial plants to kind of represent the land before the fighting. And then the floor switches to brown with all these dead trees representing the battlefields as well. So even our thinking is kind of along the lines of what's going on.
Right.
You've got what's left after the fighting. It's the soldier's mum, soldier's widow, soldier's daughter. It's all personal stuff here, because when all is said and done, it's all very well talking about armies and divisions and that, but bottom line is it's people, isn't it?
Yeah.
You got aircraft here, and we talk about films that were made just after the First World War, and Wings is a cracking film which you can find on the internet, but it does show that planes are made of canvas and wood. Metal might be the engines, maybe a machine gun, but if your plane catches fire, no parachutes in those days.
Right.
So
That was it.
it was only just about 8 weeks before the end of the war that the Germans started to issue in some of their pilots with parachutes. Now, people say that the generals are saying, "Oh, don't give them parachutes, or else they'll don't give them parachutes, or else they'll be jumping out in the middle of a fight and not really fighting their way through it." But the truth is, parachutes were so big and heavy and bulky that the planes didn't have enough power to carry them anyway.
Right.
We're setting up all sorts of medical bits and pieces here, and in the past there has been evidence sort of taken by groups of visitors here in the evenings of activity in this area.
That's a medical bit. Dee. Okay.
This is the biggest memorial on the battlefields. There's the names of 73,000 missing soldiers with their names engraved on the white panels here, including my great uncle's name, my grandbrother's name. He's here.
That's where they just had the who went there? It was the older prince. Charles. The 100th anniversary.
Oh right, yeah.
They had a big,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
all the
yeah.
prime ministers and all that
Yeah.
was there. And,
Yeah, because they sealed it off to the public, so everyone who went to visit the names of people here couldn't get through because of all the royalty there.
right, yeah.
This is a new model coming in. It's going to be a model of Gallipoli. So you're going to have Turks at the top, Brits, Australians, New Zealanders at the bottom here, fighting their way up. Aircraft. And I'll tell you, if I have to make another model of a biplane, I will scream, because making models of single-wing planes like Spitfires and Hurricanes from World War II, easy. Trying to get the blooming top wings on these planes, nightmare, getting the struts all lined up. But anyway, part of the rich tapestry, isn't it? You've got the Red Baron here, and I mentioned his cousin, Frida, marrying D.H. Lawrence. The Red Baron had a pet dog called Moritz. And Moritz, one day, when the Red Baron's taxiing his plane over the airfield, Moritz ran in front of the plane. As a loud bang, the propeller blew itself to 1,000,000 pieces of wood, and the dog's howling. Red Baron thinks he's killed Moritz, gets out. The dog's still standing there. Used to have 2 long hound ears. He's now got 1.5. And they reckon that the very tip of the propeller glanced off the dog's skull, chopping off his ear, but without actually fracturing the skull, you know. So the propeller came off worst. We've got a library here, 5,500 books and magazines. And let me just grab this light, because I'll show you in here in a sec. There's various artifacts and bits and pieces dotted around all over the place. So there's your there's your French helmets, early German, later German. Silk postcards that the women were making for selling to the soldiers.
Oh, the bayonet.
Yep, German Mauser bayonet. Bits and pieces here.
Bayonet north.
And you'll have to excuse the modern
Yeah.
paraphernalia here. Yes, we had the staff Christmas party, but Charles Dickens, characters from Oliver Twist, Portsmouth Guildhall, HMS Victory. Charles Dickens loses one of his grandsons on the battlefield, and we sometimes visit Cedric's grave. Another grave, nothing to do with Dickens, but someone who had a famous grandfather. We visit the grave of Chief Standing Buffalo, who's a Sioux Indian, 19 years old, and his grandfather was Sitting Bull, who wipes out General Custer at Battle of Little Bighorn.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, funny how they're all interlocked or intertwined.
Yeah, well,
somehow,
this is
isn't
it. This is what history's all about, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, again, if you want for places like this, then people wouldn't know, would they?
Yeah. And then lots of work going on around this area. Little end gauge railway going in. Loosely based off Lowestoft, but we're going to have a Zeppelin flying over here. Poor old Lowestoft got bombed from the air and shelled from the sea.
Right.
So we're doing all that. And before anybody says, why have you got space models here? All right. Right. I like anything to do with space. However, the first moon landing was only 50 years after the First World War.
Right.
All right, if you actually think about it.
Yep.
Okay. So they've gone from virtually no planes to landing on the moon. Secondly, when you fire flare guns in the First World War, it goes up with the same sort of movement as a rocket.
Right.
So we're doing an exhibition here, calling it From Flares to Moon Landing, and people were talking about the surface of the moon looking like the battlefields. Okay.
Right.
Well, you can see that from the two pictures. One's the battlefields, one's the surface of the moon.
Yeah. Okay.
So, case for defence, rest me, Lord. That's why we're doing it.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Let's come this way. So we use the area through there for any visitors who come in at night. We can set it up theatre style for lectures and talks, or for people wanting to test equipment on artifacts, this kind of thing. See if they get any readings. And the rest of the time we can use it as a bit of a cafe as well.
Right. So, Ampen area, guys. Troops. If you haven't been down to this place, it's quite remarkable actually. Lots to take in.
Women in the First World War, in the factories, they're touching and breathing in a lot of the poisons that are for the explosives they're making. Their skin's turning yellow. Women are dying from that. They're also painting the numbers onto dials for ships and aircrafts. And they're using radioactive luminous paint with radium in it.
Right.
And they're licking their paintbrushes to get fine points. And they're swallowing radium.
Right.
And radium replaces calcium, causes some horrendous growths and damage. And loads of women are dying from that as well.
As if life wasn't bad enough then.
I know.
Yeah, and then they go and throw it out at you.
And here, I'll give you a chance to catch up. Right. French infantry, at the beginning of the war, they're wearing red trousers. We call them "Here I Am, Shoot Me" trousers, because they're not exactly camouflage.
No.
French never had enough sandbags at the beginning of the war, and you need sandbags at the front of your trench to stop incoming bits of metal, and also at the back of your trench so your head's not silhouetted against the skyline. So instead of sandbags, the French are tending to use dead German bodies. Well, the bodies are dissolving into the ground, so when the French move out of the trench and the Brits move in to continue the fighting, first thing our men are complaining about is the smell. Please, sir, don't like the smell here. Next thing is, there's arms and legs like this hanging out from the sides of the trench. Now, you know what we're like with bad humour in this country, all right? We'll make bad jokes about anything. Mm-hmm. So it's, hello, mate, how's the war going for you? Or pleased to meet you, yeah? And then the officer says, get rid of it. So you hack it off, pick it up, throw it out of the trench into no man's land where the rats come along. And the rats have got so much food, and a breeding pair of rats can produce 900 offspring in a year. So these rats there's millions of them just everywhere. and some of them are getting big, the size of cats or small terrier dogs. So not a happy place to be. And there is a story of a British soldier goes into a dugout to see his officer, and when he goes in, the soldier's holding the side of his head, and the officer says, "What's up with you? Have you been shot? Have you been wounded?" And the soldier says, "No." He says, "This is all my wife's fault." And the officer says, "Explain." And soldier said, "She sent me a bottle of hair tonic. I put it on my hair last night, went to sleep in the bottom of the trench, and when I woke up this morning, I'm surrounded by rats licking and drinking the tonic out of my hair because they like the flavour of it. And when I moved, one of them bit me," and he's blaming his wife for it, as you do.
Right, fair enough. But didn't the rats carry the plague?
Well, yeah, but they weren't carrying plague sort of in those battlefield days.
Right.
All sorts of things here, all busy being labelled. There's new stuff pours in all the time.
Right. So people just send you stuff through the post and whatever.
Yeah, or bring it in themselves, send us copies of photographs or documents. And it doesn't have to be military. Anything from, say, the 1914, 1920 time period, kids, schooling, ordinary documents, just so we build up a picture of what's going on.
Yeah.
And the model here was built by a 14-year-old lad in a week. And the boy's into dioramas because he does a lot of the old war gaming and Warcraft. So he's used to building stuff. But of course, J.R. Tolkien, who wrote Lord of the Rings, he was a First World War soldier, and that's a picture of him there. And he gets inspiration for his Lord of the Rings from things that he's seeing and hearing out on the battlefields. So the flamethrower, the German flamethrower troops, he imagines are dragons and things like that. Winnie the Pooh, that comes out of the First World War as well. Yeah. Canadian soldier buys a baby black bear cub in Winnipeg. So he calls it Winnie. His intention is to take it into the trenches as a mascot. Gets to London, or Salisbury actually, gets to Salisbury, and he's told, "You are not taking that bear cub into the trenches, get rid of it." So he drives to London and hands it over to London Zoo. And the bear is so tame, you can sit next to it, drinking tea, coffee, eating, and the bear's part of the gang, while you're sitting there. And so people are having their photographs taken next to it. And A.A. Milne, who writes Winnie the Pooh, he used to take his son Christopher Robin into London Zoo, and Christopher Robin is well taken by this bear, so tame. So Christopher Robin's got he's got a doll or a toy bear that he calls Edward Bear. And so he goes home, changes the name of it to Winnie after the live bear in London Zoo. And when Christopher Robin plays games with Winnie the bear and all the other little animal characters, it gives his dad the inspiration for writing stories about Winnie the Pooh.
Right. Everything we grew up with as kids.
Yep. Shrapnel balls, they come raining out of the shells in the sky, whizzing down, peppering everything.
Right.
The generals are hoping, in a lot of cases, that the balls are going to cut the barbed wire. Ain't going to happen, all right? It's just not going to happen. It'll pepper everything else, but it won't cut the barbed wire.
So like a cluster bomb then.
Yeah.
Airburst and then
That's it.
do the damage below.
And then you've got an original German trench mortar here. So this little devil would have been lobbing stuff in our direction around about 1916, 17. And there's the kind of shell it'd be firing as well at the back there.
Right.
So this is all original stuff. Fuel cans, when they're empty of fuel, the authorities are putting in water, drinking water, to bring into the trenches. Can't get rid of the fumes out of it though.
No.
So you're drinking mostly water tainted with petrol. And in some of their writings, the soldiers are joking about it and saying, "Oh, this tastes a bit like BP," or "Oh, this tastes a bit like Shell."
Yeah.
And we turned this whole area into a memorial area. So if anyone's lost someone who was alive in the First World War, then we're happy to put up either a cross or a Star of David, whatever, and we'll turn this whole area into something that's getting people involved and being part of our remembrance here.
Yeah. I'm sure there's people out there that trace their family trees back that far. I mean, we went to, where did we go there? Clay, not,
we went to
Knoll Cemetery?
No, the Royal Naval Cemetery in Gosford.
Oh yeah. We talk about gas hoods as opposed to gas masks. These are fairly modern gas masks from the 1980s, and there's a Second World War one down there beside the rat. But gas hoods were soaked in chemicals to absorb the chlorine.
Right.
And there's a picture there of some British soldiers in World War One wearing them.
Life's a gas, eh?
Yeah. And here, me talking about the moon landings, there's rockets here in a French trench, and they'd use the rockets to call up artillery support, you know, different colours, this kind of thing.
So a bit of semaphore, but not with flags.
Yeah. Talk a lot about German artists, and this particular character, Otto Dix. After the First World War, he did a series of 54 pictures of his memories of being a German infantryman in the war. Right. Hitler hears what Otto Dix is doing and orders his arrest for doing anti-German, anti-war propaganda. And Dix gets a warning phone call from one of his mates that the police are on their way to arrest him. So he flees to Switzerland and spends the rest of his days in Switzerland.
But Hitler was in the trenches though, was he?
Yeah, Hitler was a corporal in the First World War, and there's all sorts of stories there. And also Hitler, Hitler in World War II is obviously being slanged off by Winston Churchill, especially about Hitler's paintings and pictures that he was doing trying to earn a living before the First World War. I've seen some of the paintings, and they're actually quite good. And I wish the Git had stayed doing painting instead of sort of causing World War II and all the aggro that goes with it.
I heard Hitler went to the Jewish art school in Paris with his art.
Possibly, I don't know.
And they refused him entry, saying it wasn't good enough.
Oh right, so that wound him up.
Yeah,
did
so
it?
that was his anti-bit for the Jews.
But then also, I'm well aware that Hitler was selling a lot of his paintings through a Jewish chap selling the paintings for him, and the two of them got on quite well together. So, you know, swings and roundabouts, isn't it?
Makes you wonder though when you look at what he did after.
Yeah. There's all sorts of bits and pieces here, and we've got the ability of filling this area up with theatrical smoke and green lights. And we give the kids reproduction gas hoods, and when it all starts up, they're under instructions to shout gas, 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 and put their hoods on.
Right. So this is where they sit in here and look through a periscope.
Well,
is it?
yeah. What we've got this trench periscope that turns left and right, so you can go inside, look through the periscope.
Just bring this to the viewers at home. Sat on my nice comfy chairs.
That's it. So if you look through it,
so
let me try and light up the area here for you.
Bit dusty. Right. I'm sort of vaguely looking at it, I think.
Well, it saves you getting your head shot off.
Yeah. But you know, I mean, that was the old whistle blast and over we go, wasn't it?
Yeah. Then you're going to need to. That's it. Sideways. And this came off a French chateau, and it says, "Touch me and hear my voice." So
it's got a sort of squeak like to it, isn't it? After the bell, you can hear it sort of squeakiness.
We talk about animals in this section, and we had a group of 10-year-olds in. We get a load of school groups, but we've been here for a few years, and this 10-year-old lad came up to me just a few months ago, and he says, "Please, sir," he says, "do you know what the dogs are called that are trained to go out to find the wounded?" And the dogs have got little packets of bandages and things like that. And I knew the lad was going to hit me with something weird. And I said, "No." I said, "What are they called?" He says, "Dogters." And it's so good. We're starting to use it now. So we're referring to these dogs as dogters.
They were dogters. I remember watching
And over here, you got German barbed wire. You got the tanks, model tanks, which are things that could get through the barbed wire. Also, you've got the London buses. And of course, they're still the London buses had only just started going into London, this style, in 1910, so 4 years before the war. And then a lot of them, about 900 of them, taken out to the battlefields, have boards put down the side, painted green, and used to carry the troops around.
Yeah, but then they also converted some into hospitals and they just make them.
Oh yeah, yeah, and they were using some as X-ray. They had travelling X-ray machines as well, which was a new sort of style of things. And then out on the battlefields, every year when the farmers are ploughing their fields, they're coming up with stuff like this all the time. They call it the Iron Harvest, and even sort of down to sort of unexploded shells, which you look at. You don't prod them with your boot though, and just in case they're gas shells, and you crack the rusty outer casing. But we took the Lord Mayor of Portsmouth out about 3 years ago, and we went into a field to have a look at something, and we drove past a couple of unexploded shells, and he looked at me and he said, "Charles," he says, "are you trying to get on the 6 o'clock news for blowing up the Lord Mayor of Portsmouth?" Would I? Right. Now then, you got the pole at the back here, which is what they used to hammer into the ground to hang the barbed wire on, and you can see the bullet holes in it. Now, obviously, you don't want to make noise, and hammering tends to attract machine gun fire. So these are developed, and you can bung either a piece of wood or something through there and quietly twist it into the ground, then hang your barbed wire on it. But the Swedes are making most of these, and they're selling them to both Britain and Germany.
Right.
And so we paid the Swedes a lot of money to stop supplying the Germans. Then we discover the Swedes are selling the Germans lots of copper ore, and the ore is being smelted down in Germany to get the ore, the copper out of it for their war machine. So we paid the Swedes a lot of money to stop that. Unbeknown to us, the Swedes are actually then smelting the ore down, getting the copper out of it, casting it into statues of German heroes, and selling these models, pure copper models, to the Germans, because we never said anything about not giving the Germans fine art. Okay, Germans are then smelting them down and getting the copper. So such is life. And then we've got our little sort of shop here, all sorts of things and bits and bobs. And we've got over here, there's a mass of clothing that youngsters can wear, or the young at heart, and they can dress up, including some of the repro gas hoods, stand in front of the old horse here and get their pictures taken. Makes a good backdrop.
Look, even one for your ring Muppets.
They're fairly modern, all these bits and pieces.
There's an old WRAC badge. Don't see them anymore. Rack. I won't say what rack was the definition for.
What's the what, sorry?
Rack. Rack, Women's Royal Army Corps.
Yeah.
Weekly ration of army. I'll say no more.
Right, okay.
Right, so anything else you want to say at this point?
I don't
Charles,
think so, apart from the fact that, I mean, we run fairly regular trips out to the battlefields. Also, if anyone wants to come in here, the only day that we tend to be closed is a Saturday. We are open every other day of the week, including Sundays, and we usually run from about 11 till about 3ish in the afternoon. Don't charge, it's free entrance. But we do have a visitors book, and if people like this place, we hope they'll write kind comments, because we can use those whenever we're showing the council what we're up to with their building. Because officially this still belongs to the council,
Right.
even though it was a ruin. It was completely trashed.
Yeah.
The windows and doors were smashed in, no floor. Bonfires in here, this sort of thing. So we've got security set up. There's cameras everywhere, as you discovered when you turned up.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to contact us, they're more than welcome. And I think you're planning to put, is it details of our phone numbers?
Yeah, well, I'll put all the details on the bottom of the description on YouTube and on Facebook. I'll add a comment either below or above the video itself.
Okay. And we organise everything for the trip, any sort of special food requirements. And usually what we do is go out on a Friday morning and come back on the Sunday evening.
Right.
And we either go to the Somme in France or Ypres, Wipers in Belgium. We don't tend to do the same in one weekend, because I never see any point in sitting on a coach when you could be nosing around out, because there's so much to see in both places.
Yeah.
And we get people coming along. I think we've had one chap been with us for about 10 trips so far. You know?
Okay.
Because there's just so much to see and do out there.
And that's your ferry crossing included, is it?
Yeah. So we cover the cost of. We usually go by ferry rather than the train, simply because the troops went by ferry, and as you wave goodbye to the White Cliffs of Dover, you begin to get the feel of what the troops were experiencing as well.
Gotcha.
Yeah, if people want to contact us, then we can let them know. Or if groups want to come in here, whether it be to do with hunting for spirits, or whether they want a lecture, a talk, we can do that as well. And we get lots of youngsters, schools, all your guides, your scouts, cubs and brownies, they all come in here. And military organisations, army cadets. And I help with the Hanson Isle of Wight Army Cadet Force band. So sometimes they come here, and we're planning on having concerts outside in the summer, and also putting on military type Shakespearean plays, and some plays about World War I as well. So kind of watch your space.
Okay, there you go. Happy days. Right. We'll just one more this way. Dee-dee-dee. There we go, the Great War, as it was known. Not like World War II. Oh, tilt.
Don't fall down those stairs, whatever you do.
Well, I'm going to conclude part 2 of this tour, and then we will come back after a quick interval, where we're going to relight our candles, and then we'll do the investigation. So stand by for the remaining part. And this is our 4-piece top. I'll just give Martin a quick flash of it. And on the back, I don't know if you can see it. No, you can't see the hood, can you? No, you got about 18 layers on. Right, so this is big shout out to Mike Dyer Arts on Facebook, who does all our artwork for the channel, and we just get his artwork put onto our hoodies. So if you want a hoodie, then let us know. Right, okay, we're going to disappear now for a quick half-an-hour break. I've got your card somewhere. Let's get that up on there. Oh, right, so there's all the details there of Charles, his contact phone number and his email, and the actual address of the location if you want to come. Charles, nice guy, really friendly, not willing to turn anyone away. So don't be shy, come and say hi. So I'm going to leave it here for now, and see you in about 20 minutes.